She's not what you'd expect. She's tough and feisty, but gentle and tender. She makes millions and gives millions to the poor. She cries, she laughs, she teaches, she comforts. This is the Dani Johnson Show.
Hi, I'm Dani Johnson. Thanks so much for joining us with the Dani Johnson Show today. Hey, it's been Thanksgiving week. Are you like stuffed, bloated? You got bags under your eyes? Yeah. So it's the day of Thanksgiving, right? And I hope you've enjoyed this week of Thanksgiving and all the talk that we've brought to the table about how gratitude can make you more money and how gratitude can actually improve your work life and reduce your stress and make you more valuable and find better satisfaction at work. And then, of course, you heard the message on Wednesday, the spiritual equipping broadcast that was all about Thanksgiving and what it does to you internally and driving you closer to your Creator, your Father, the one who loves and adores you, and how much it changes you internally. And then, of course, yesterday. I don't know if you saw yesterday's show, if you were too busy with all your preparations, but if you missed it, you absolutely have to see it. This is where we had the opportunity to thank you personally for who you are in all of our lives. And so today, just like any other Friday, it's a family focus. So we wanted to talk about what gratitude can do in your marriage. Listen, friend, as I confessed to you earlier on in this week, I am the person who largely was a pessimist, and that's just the way my brain was wired. And so when I have that, when you know that about yourself and you know that's a weakness that you have that you naturally see, it's a certain personality that naturally looks at the negative first and then flips it over and sees the positive side. But when we are that way, not everybody else is that way in our lives. And it can really, really tax the family that you're living with, especially your spouse, when everything you see is wrong and it's not good enough. And there seems to be some kind of a measuring stick that your poor spouse is trying to live under. And I certainly know that I created that measuring stick for Hans, especially in the early days. And so I've worked really diligently for like 23 years of our 25 years of marriage to see the other side, to really lavish him with appreciation and encouragement, because I spent the first year for sure being very abusive with my mouth and completely emasculating him. And it took years for him to be able to bounce back from all the torment and all the pain, the suffering, the horrible daggers that I shot at his absolute manhood. And so today I want us to kind of have this quick focus in this broadcast for us to look at, wow, what is the difference, right? So what kind of an impact can it have that if I show gratitude towards my spouse versus if I don't show gratitude towards my spouse? I've got some information from Focus on the Family here that only 10% of our happiness actually comes from our circumstances. What? Isn't that crazy to think about? Okay, so in their survey and in their understanding and the research that they've done, that only 10% of our happiness comes from our circumstances. I have to tell you, I completely agree with that. Because look, when you have gone on the ground in third world countries to places like Nicaragua, where we have had, where we've built like 1,500 homes now in the country of Nicaragua that is just in shambles right now, right? And yet they have gratitude. They have nothing. And when I say nothing, I mean absolutely nothing. We're talking, they have a plastic roof. They have plastic walls, right? I want you to imagine garbage sacks, and that's what you've kind of put together and wrapped around a tree to kind of create some kind of shelter away from the insane rains that are happening right now, monsoon season down in Nicaragua, October and November. The rain actually starts to clear up around this time of year, and it starts to get really beautiful next month in December. But anyway, the bottom line is that when you've traveled to places like Haiti and you've traveled to places like India and you've spent time with the extreme poor like I have, it is amazing to me how their circumstances are absolutely debilitating, and yet smiles on their faces. Yeah, smiles on their faces, gratitude inside their hearts, and then ever so much more when they receive a home because of what you did, because of the giving that you did to King's Ransom. 1,500 homes have been able to be built for people who have nothing, absolutely nothing. So I agree with the statement that Focus on the Family put out, this study that they put out, that only 10% of our happiness comes from our circumstances. I've been through some terrible things, and so have you. And there's been times where I've allowed the terrible things to beat me up, and there are other times where I said nope, and I began to beat up those terrible things and just said, no, I am going to choose how I am going to address this. I'm going to choose faith. I'm going to choose trust in my God no matter what is happening in my life. I am going to choose gratitude in this circumstance. I believe gratitude has saved our marriage. There's a few things that have saved our marriage, but I know that gratitude and that shift inside of both of our hearts and in our minds, because it's so easy that when you've had so much water under the bridge, right? So much resentment, so much lashing out and accusations towards each other and misunderstandings and even expectations that are not spoken. So unspoken expectations and all of this I don't know, kind of this expectation of expecting our spouse to be perfect and wanting our spouse to kind of bend over to our way of thinking and really to abandon who they are and to become you, right? Which is wrong. I mean, that right there is telling the Creator that he screwed up when he created your spouse, which is not correct. So is it possible that perhaps you're not seeing from a greater perspective, that you're only seeing from a small part of the picture, a small perspective? But what if there's a greater perspective out there? Now, what would happen if you actually did show more gratitude towards your spouse? What would happen inside of your marriage? Well, some might say, well, I'm not going to do that. Then there's going to be, he's going to think or she's going to think that they're off the hook and they don't have to do anything. I already do most of the work around the house. This is how I used to think. I already do everything. I do all the laundry. I bring home the bacon. I take care of all the cooking. I change all the diapers. He doesn't do anything. That's how I used to see it. And I used to say it. And it was destroying us. So if only 10% of our circumstances determines our happiness, then that means 90% is determined by our mindset and our attitude. It is not happiness that makes us grateful. It's gratefulness that makes us happy. Ponder on that for a minute. It's not happiness that makes us grateful. It's gratefulness that makes us happy. There's so many things this week, right, that we've talked about. Look at all the benefits of gratitude. It's almost like we should write a book on it. I'm sure books have been written on it. But just look at that. We talked about journaling, right? Writing down 5 to 15 things that you're grateful for every night before you go to bed or first thing in the morning. And it shows, studies have proven that those people make more money because they're not looking for other things to give them satisfaction. They already have satisfaction. They already have contentment. So they're able to save money because they don't need anything. And so now they're being able to accumulate wealth. So if we look at it in our marriage, I actually did this with a couple. It was amazing. I had this woman come to me. You're going to freak out when I tell you this. I had this woman come to me, beautiful, tall, blonde, probably in her late 50s. And she was married to a gorgeous Kenny Rogers looking guy. Now, if you're 25, you probably don't know who that is, but Google him. Right? So he's got white hair, he had a white goatee, amazing singer, he's a country western singer, and he was just gorgeous, right? And so this woman, this tall, short blonde, platinum blonde haired, in her late 50s, married to this little bit shorter, greatly built, but he looked like Kenny Rogers. I mean, he was gorgeous. She came to me and she says, I have fallen out of love with my husband. And by the way, this is like her second or third marriage. I have fallen out of love with my husband. And this was out of first steps to success. They were there for business. And she said that they killed each other all the time. Like they just couldn't stand each other. And she says, and I had a man come to me. And by the way, they lived in Utah. I had a man and his wife approach me and tell me that God had told them I was supposed to be his next wife. So his wife was with him and they believed in having multiple wives. And so they approached her, and she wasn't even of the same faith that they were, but they approached her and said God had told them that she was supposed to be the next wife. Next, meaning not just the second wife, but perhaps there'd be more wives. And she says, and so I'm really praying about that because I'm thinking, because I no longer love my husband, that maybe this is the move God wants me to do. And I looked at her and I said, I'm not so sure what God might be telling that man, that you're supposed to be his next wife. But there's one thing I can tell you. Falling out of love happens through a lack of gratitude. And choosing to see all the flaws instead of choosing to see what you saw in him when you first married him. So I have an assignment for you. To make sure you're hearing from God, to make sure you don't make a bad decision and to make sure you make a wise one, I have an assignment for you. Between now and the next first steps, which was going to be 4 weeks away, I said, I'm going to see you in the next city that we're doing the next first steps in. And what I want you to do is an exercise. Every night before you go to bed, I want you to make a list of 5 to 10 things that you are thankful for. 5 to 10 things that you are grateful for. I want you to write down 5 to 10 things, perhaps, that you're seeing progress in. Places where things are improving. I want you to focus on the things that are working, and I want you to refuse to focus on the things that are not. This has to happen twice a day, in the morning and at night. I want you to have what we call a sprouts journal. What's a sprout? A sprout is evidence, like when you plant a seed, it comes a tiny little vulnerable sprout. This is evidence of what is to come. It's not the full-fledged fruit yet. It's not the big tree yet. It's not an orchard yet, but it's proof. That little tiny, very vulnerable, very weak sprout is evidence of what is to come. So I want you to write down any kind of improvement, any kind of advancement, and anything that you are grateful for. First thing in the morning, right before you put your eyes to bed at night. 4 weeks later, she meets me in the next city at the next first steps to success. And her husband are hanging all over each other. And she came to me and she said, that one exercise saved my marriage. I am clear on who I'm supposed to be married to. Thank you so much, Dani. I see her a year later, 5 years later. Guess what? Same thing. They were all over each other, fully in love again. Each time I had seen her, she says, I'm still doing that exercise. Friend, gratitude changes everything, especially in a marriage. Listen to this. In a study from the Journal of Personality and Social Psychology, couples who felt appreciated by their partner were more likely to show appreciation to them. So if you want to receive more gratitude from your spouse, you have to give gratitude to your spouse. If you want to receive appreciation and recognition from your spouse, you have to start giving it to them. You see, the two of you have a garden, your own personal Garden of Eden, if you will. And in this garden, what you plant into it is what you reap. So if you're planting bad, toxic, terrible seed of neglect and pessimism and keeping records of wrong, if you're planting into the garden discouragement, rejection, then all you're going to harvest from the garden of your marriage are all of those things. But you don't harvest like one seed planted, you get one thing back. No way. It's 10, 30, 70, or 100-fold. You can also use that exact same garden to plant what? Acceptance, love, mercy, kindness, grace. That when the other person falls short in a day, you extend kindness. You extend forgiveness, you plant mercy, you plant grace, you plant love. That even when you see your spouse having a bad one, right? Just like, oh, like they got a burr under their saddle, right? That's just, or they've stepped on something and it's like not good and like it's just, they're just having a bad one. Rather than reacting to their bad attitude, which is exactly what I used to do to Hans, because he would have many of these, like what would happen at work that day with the business would determine how he was at night. And so when he'd walk in the door and he's like, he's frowning, he's mad, he's ticked that someone didn't do this and ticked that someone missed a deadline on that and ticked that somebody said this and forgot that and, that he asked for something 17 times and still didn't get it. He was so mad all the time. There was actually a very long period of time that he was mad all the time and never satisfied. And what I did for too many times until I got it in my head is I would react to him and I'd find myself defending the staff. I found myself like, but wait a second, change your attitude about that. Maybe see it from a different perspective. And I was trying to change how he saw it. And then I figured it out. I am sowing what he is sowing. I'm not helping the situation. But what could I do to change it was to simply go, honey, I'm so sorry you've had a bad day. I'm really sorry. And I would become a safe place for him to be able to just vent. And then I would just encourage him and tell him, I think you're wise. I think you're awesome. And I think that you're going to make wise decisions. I began to sow encouragement and I began to sow kindness into my husband. I began to sow appreciation. Thank you for all the work that you're doing every day. Thank you for putting up with everything you're putting up with every day. Thank you also for the investment that you're making, even though you're frustrated. Thank you for how you are providing for us. Thank you for how you're thinking about our future. And I began to focus and sow in the direction where he needed that encouragement. This began to change our relationship. Giving kindness in the face of his frustration. So whatever you sow into the garden of your marriage, you're going to reap 10, 30, 70, 100-fold. So be careful and be wise. Because if you put gratitude in, you are going to get it out. Listen to this. Instead of waiting for the other person to make you feel good, you can jumpstart the cycle and take it into your own hands by focusing on what's good in your relationship. That's according to Psychology Today. Friend, you can change that relationship by changing you. You are in control of your thoughts. You're in control of your feelings. Own them and see the marriage as a beautiful, flourishing field with perfect soil, ready to receive so that it can multiply anything you plant into it. And make the choice on a daily basis to plant gratitude. You plant gratitude, you are going to reap what? Everything we've talked about this week. You want the family finances to grow? Hello. Plant gratitude into the marriage. You want the work life that you guys have, whether one of you are working full-time in the home, plant gratitude into the home and plant the gratitude into the laundry, plant the gratitude into the dishes, plant the gratitude into the fact that you can afford to even have a home, that you actually have food to be able to put on the table, because there's people that don't have homes and there's people that don't have money for food, like the people I was telling you about in Nicaragua. Plant gratitude into your spiritual life. Plant it into the marriage. Plant it into your kids and begin to watch things change. With something so simple, and it can change. By the way, if what I was talking about earlier with King's Ransom was like, I don't know, just kind of making you go, man, that's terrible. I want to find out more information about that. Get over to kingsransom.org and sow some gratitude into that soil. You have an opportunity, whether you are passionate about freeing kids out of sex trade. We have a goal to free 1,000 kids from the sex trade. If you want to help build the second bundle of houses, which is another 1,000 houses, we're at 1,500 right now. So if you want to help us get to 2,000 houses that we're building there, it only costs $5,200 to build a home there that lasts through hurricanes and all kinds of weather issues, earthquakes that they have there a lot. You want to see children have a greater life. You want to help take care of orphans? kingsransom.org. So if Nicaragua is tugging on your heart, just click on Nicaragua. You'll see right there in the homepage, you'll see it right there where it talks about 1,000 homes. So click on that and do what you can. Do what you can, because those people will be eternally grateful for what you've done. I would spend some time. Sometimes we can become more grateful when we see what somebody else doesn't have. And that can help to change your life. It certainly has changed mine, a former greedy pig who was never satisfied and always negative. So get over there, kingsransom.org. All right, so today, make the choice that for the rest of this year, sow gratitude. Even write notes of gratitude to your spouse and begin to see what happens. Okay, thanks so much for joining us. Please share it. Please leave us your comments below, because we do read them and you really mean a lot to us. God bless you and have a great one. Bye.